this work? Yeah. You guys can hear me? And on Zoom? Great. So very excited to be here with friends. As Eric mentioned, we took a trip together in 2022, funded by UJA Federation of New York. And on that trip, we really became family. And so about 2 years later, almost, we can still kind of feel the impact of this trip and other trips that we've funded, and very, very excited to be here with all of you. So I want to lift up a few examples, and then I want to start the conversation. So you have their bios on the back of your program. What it doesn't say are a few quick vignettes I would just want to share. So tonight, Minister Mark McLean is partnering with the Interreligious Council of New Rochelle, NAACP, and our own network agency, the JCC Midwestchester, to show a documentary that really lifts up the relationship that the Jewish community and the Black Christian community have with one another. This program is actually supported and part of UJA's MLK program, so one of 25 Black Christian Jewish partnerships that we have this year. And so I just want to kind of lift that up and push pause. Yesterday morning, I walked through the doors of Calvary Baptist Church as Reverend Trollinger is building a coalition of hope. The room was packed. This was the third meeting of its kind, I think the third. Many more planned, as he continued to tell us. Really with this idea of bringing together community leaders and faith leaders to combat hate and to support the community and to make the community better. This isn't something that's just specific to White Plains. This is something that is countywide. It is something I would say we feel in our kishkas, in our gut, in our how would you translate that, Rabbi? That it's a calling, and it is beautiful to see this room, to be a part of it, to support it, and to continue to see where it goes. And lastly, I will say after our 2 or 3 interfaith clergy trips in Westchester, we created a table. Sometimes that table is 5 people, sometimes it's 20, but the interfaith clergy that have gone on this trip, and now we're about to open it up beyond this trip, come together. They know it exists. They know they can talk to one another, support one another, bring up issues, and that is led by Rabbi Menachem Creditor. So I want to thank all of you for all the work you have done, all the work you're going to continue to do to make this world a better place in a very challenging time. So let's start off this conversation. I want everyone to get to know you better in this room. I have some questions, but we can also see where it takes us, which I know, knowing you all, we'll see where this goes. Why don't we start off? I'm curious for you to share with the room your personal story, how your faith has inspired you to stand up against these injustices, and in a way that aligns with Dr. King's vision and message.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, no, I'm Baptist, so I got to say it again. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Now we're cooking, amen. Now we're cooking, all right. Mentioning Dr. King's name and me and Menachem during my experiential time of his driving into the city of New York City today was very interesting to me, and just wanted to say that Menachem's that person that I'd be yelling at, that be cutting people off and stuff like that, and so now I know who it is. So. On the other side of the trip, but yeah, it was interesting, and I think that's how my faith is in regard. So I consider myself, though I'm a part of the Baptist denomination, I consider myself a liberation theologist minister, and that's in the root of Nat Turner, Martin Luther King, and many other people that look at Holy Scripture and make it applicable to everyday life, and that the book is not a book that is historical. It is a book of action. It's a book of demonstration. It's a book of manifestation of God's divine will and purpose and promise that lies in each and every one of us. At the results of the election, within the African American community, there was a sense of hopelessness, a sense of uncertainty, and, excuse me for cussing, what the hell is going on? And that was felt. People were depressed, people were getting together and just were really, 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 really confused. And I went into prayer, and once again, I felt the call to do something, And so we brought together, with the help of my friends that went to Israel with me, and Elliot and others, and we called for stakeholders and religious communities to come together to try to figure out what's happening, what we're going to do. And we walked out of there with a sense of hope and not despair. Just so happened in other Christian faiths, that was the day after Advent. And my church doesn't observe Advent, but the first candle that is lit is the candle of hope. And so we stayed there because that was the primary thing. And so we are now in the process of creating a coalition of hope, built upon the fact of what our CEO has said, that out of this Yule mountain, we're going to find some hope, because embedded in it, there's something beautiful. Embedded in it is something powerful. So I use my faith, I use my spirit and the giftings that God has given to me to try to say that in our faith communities, we can use the essence of our talents and our skills to produce hope and not despair, to do something that gives a person a reason to get up in the morning and continue to do what they do.
Before I hand the microphone to my brother, Elder Mark, I want to say that the reason why I drove that way is because I know how Mark believes, but I needed to see how Reverend Trollinger believed. Who is he going to call out to in his moment of distress? I'll say more in a moment.
Yes. I know you will. Peace and blessings, family. Good morning.
Good morning.
You guys look wonderful. With how Billy Crystal would say, you guys look marvelous. I'm very happy to be here. I just want to honor you for all the work that you guys do. It's very important. I'm very happy to have my wife here. I want to honor her because she is the foundation of my life. Denise. Wow, I mean, my faith was the internal gift of my mother, who taught me to believe in God and in Christ. She's still here with me. She's 95 years old, and she's the second most important person in my life after my wife. But, my faith informs me. I am a disciple of Jesus, and Jesus' work was always in the community, was always with people. And so, my motivation is I do a lot of interfaith work. Sometimes I get flack from it, but, my motto and my ethos is relationship. It's the most important thing. Relationship over religion. Relationship over race. Because at the end of the day, God created one race, the human race. And we all are connected because we all carry the image of God. And it's been wonderful to reach out and connect with the humanity of other people. learn about other cultures, learn and respect other religions. And I just want to thank UJA for funding this trip that we do, the religious trip to Israel. It is a wonderful and valuable investment in humanity. And it's a gift that it continues to give. You're sowing seed that is, you're going to reap a tremendous harvest from it. The trip in 2022, we are still eating from that. It has been such a valuable lesson. And I will just end in terms of this opening statement, in terms of the with two quotes to really focus on the importance of connecting with each other, how we are all interconnected. And the first quote is from the Lutheran pastor, Reverend Martin Niemöller, who was imprisoned by the Nazis. And he said, first they came for the socialists, and I said nothing, for I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I said nothing, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and again I said nothing, for I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. And that really speaks to my spirit, that we are all connected. And then Dr. King said it succinctly when he said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are all connected, and we are all responsible as God, as carriers of image of God, to turn to each other rather than away from each other. And we find ourselves, Reverend Charles spoke about, we find ourselves in challenging times in 2025. The more things change, the more things stay the same. And it's still a challenge that we must answer the call to turn to each other and not away from each other. I really am honored to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
You understand why, at least for me, this is why I do what I do as part of what we do. What a gift it is for us to be so close with the two of you and our other sisters and brothers that we've traveled with. I just want to say, in response to Tali's question, very briefly, is that on a day like this, a week like this, a life journey like this, we're called not to appropriate each other's stories, but to learn from them. And among the ways that I find this trip, these trips, this energy, this campaign to build relationships beyond any of those boundaries, one of the ways I find it so holy is that we give each other the dignities of our full identities. And we don't wait to have dignity conferred upon us. As a Jew, I learned that from many teachers, including Dr. King, who in his letter from a Birmingham jail called out against fellow religionists and other faith leaders, including some rabbis, who said, slow down. Right. And he said, I've learned over my years, and he died so young, so young. He said, I've learned over my years that wait is always code for never. And we know, as a Jewish community, but as a human community, that dignity should not have to wait. That the honor of being an image of God, doing this work, this is not something someone else needs to tell me I have permission to do. And so I bless us, even as we continue the conversation, to listen really well and not to say, oh, I know your story and it's the same as mine. No, I love you, and therefore I'm going to listen to your story and try to learn from you, offer what I can humbly. That's what it is to do this work together, and I feel so privileged to be doing it with you.
So I'm having a little deja vu. This is what it's like sitting at a dinner table in Jerusalem, everyone contributing, and you can see how Menachem facilitates. Dr. King often referred to the beloved community in a lot of his writing. I'm curious if you guys can express a little bit about how you believe both the Black and the Jewish communities can contribute to building a more inclusive and just society. So what would you say to people here and in your congregations when asked what role can they play in this work?
So if we look at what role do we play, I think we need to go back into history and understand the interconnectedness of the Jewish community and, I'm use old terminology, the Black/Negro community. Because during the process of World War II, many of the Jewish scholars that took exodus out of Europe came to America, and America, full with all of its hate and inward stupidity in regards to the Jewish people coming to America, was put on sidelines in regards to opportunity, especially the scholars. And many of those scholars ended up teaching and giving their libraries to historical Black colleges, that they were then able to become universities even today, from Grambling to Fisk University, just to name two. And the interconnectedness of the greater intelligentsia of that was birthed from those schools is a direct interconnection of the professors of Judaism, or the Jewish people. They taught and gave their books to the historical Black colleges. We also look at the history of the NAACP that would not have been in existence if it was not for the interconnection between the Jewish and the Negro/Black community. And then I've had the privilege one time in my life to work for a child care agency. And if it was not for the interconnection between the Jewish people and those and the African Americans that worked at these agencies, many of those children would have died in straight poverty on the streets of New York City. So once a person knows their history, then they can understand where they're headed. Once people know their history as a collectivist, then we'll know how we can work together. Because as we look at biblical texts from Exodus, and then we get Harriet Tubman that becomes Moses, that's not by happenstance, that's by divine grace. And so when we see the struggle of our people together, we become better. I had a moment, I'm gonna pass it on to Mark, but I had a moment. You ever one of those moments when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't go back to sleep? And I just so happened to turn the TV on, and then I learned of the plight of Jews coming from Europe to America, and learned about legislation and laws that were passed, and redlining that Black people thought that was just us, but it started even before us. And so hatred or ignorance or stupidity, and there's other choice words that now I'm a minister I don't use for people that act this way, will teach us that it doesn't begin just, the words of Mark, doesn't just begin with you, it begins with other people as well. But if we unite together against those spirits, against those influences, we become the mighty hammer that's able to chisel out what's behind that block of stone and see a beautiful, beautiful masterpiece of God's original intent of who we are.
I can go, but I don't want to follow.
Oh, okay. Yes, I just feel that when I approach this problem, I tell my people, we did it before. We can do it again. There's a rich, rich history of cooperation between the Jewish community and, I'm going to be modern, the African American community. But you know, when I took my first term at the with president of the New Rochelle branch of the NAACP, I really was very instructed by history and the fact that in New Rochelle we have a very robust African American community and we have a very robust Jewish community, and you know, I felt that it was very important to really revisit that history of cooperation and try to resuscitate that and revive that. As Reverend Trollinger said, there would be no NAACP if it was not for collaboration between the Jewish leaders and the African American leaders in 1909 in response to the brutality of lynching in the South. And so, you know, that's one motivation, is that we have a history of collaboration. We did it once, we can do it again. The other motivation is that we face the same enemy. We face the same evil. We face the same injustice. You know, there's a statistic that African American community is the #1 target for racial attacks and racial violence. And the Jewish community is the #1 target for religious violence. We say we face the same enemies. We have challenges that we have in common. And when you have the same enemy and you have the same challenges, it's only intelligent to come together and partner against them. It is unintelligent to work separately in our own silos. And so, in Dr. King, and we're Tali mentioned the event that we're sponsoring in New Rochelle, which is a very apropos event and a very timely event and a very courageous event. We know that we've had, you know, antagonism and strife today with our communities, you know, from local elections to global conflicts. There's been that tension, and it is courageous to say we are going to sit down and talk to each other rather than attack each other. Because dialogue is the best pathway to solutions. And so this documentary really is an example of the Jewish community and the African American community coming together and partnering and being consequential against evil. Dr. King and Rabbi Abraham Heschel, against many odds, answered that call to find the humanity in each other. And Rabbi Heschel, and when I watched that, Rabbi Heschel should be a household name. What he did, how he answered the call and rallied his community to come and fight in the trenches for the African American, because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so this is a difficult assignment, But I am more than certain that we are well able to possess that land of harmony and partnership because we have righteousness on our side, we have God on our side. And it is the will of God that man dwell together in peace and harmony. And so I am encouraged, even though we have difficult times. I am encouraged that we will be able to answer the call and be consequential humans in our community.
I wish more Jews would ask me the question you just asked us. How do we build a beloved community? Now, in an American context, we know the phrase, but it's not necessarily, even in moments that feel a little bit calmer, the language that is used internally. We use language like tikkun olam, healing the world, but often that becomes episodic. Like, on this day, this is the good that we do. I'm speaking, literally preaching to the preachers. Like, who we are as UJA in the world are those who are trying, even if we use different language sometimes, to build a beloved community. But one of the things that I so appreciate is the veneration of the relationship that Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel had, because actually they were out of step with their own communities, if you know your history. Dr. King struggled mightily within his own community to keep things together, to organize boycotts, to move at the pace that he was moving, and to continue receiving the trust that was not easy for him to keep. Rabbi Heschel was often despised in the academic circles that he traveled in, including my alma mater, JTS, because he dared to take the language of Jewish faith into the streets. And so the whole question of building a beloved community is one that we have to spend more time perpetuating, making pervasive in Jewish vocabulary too, because the whole question of beloved community means the boundary that is between us is artificial. There's a great debate. I'll just offer it quickly. There's a very famous verse, you might even call it literally, the golden rule in the middle of Vayikra, the middle of Leviticus. Right? Love your neighbor as yourself. In Hebrew, v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. But the rabbis debate, who is a re'ah? Who is a friend? Is a friend only your family, your subgroup, or is your neighbor your neighbor? The only way, I believe, we can build a beloved community is if we take the word neighbor to instruct the way we use Torah. I live next to you, you are my brother. I don't live next to you, you are my sister. You're a human being created in God's image, and I am obligated to you. Amen. And please God, the pragmatic solidarity that you're sharing, liberation theology and pragmatic solidarity, you want to study Paul Farmer, who founded Partners in Health, who was both pragmatic. He said the only way for us to survive, he was an immunologist, the only way for us to survive the world is to recognize that germs don't know boundaries, neither should we when it comes to taking care of ourselves if we want there to be someone to take care of us. Also, it's the right thing to do. Liberation is a collective reality, or it's not true at all. So as Rabbi Heschel said at the conference that Dr. King invited him to in Chicago called Conference on Race, he said that the first conference on race, there were two delegates, Pharaoh and Moses. This is our work.
So we could stay here for a very long time, but we're mindful of all the things that everyone has to do. So I'm going to close us up, and I'm going to ask you, I'm going to go back to your Coalition for Hope, right? That was very intentional. And if you can share your hope for our future.
So I hit a milestone last year. I crossed over and I got that white, blue card. That red, white, and blue card reminded me that time behind me is more than time in front of me. Yeah, I got about maybe 30 years to go, but we'll see. But I say that just in my say it in truth. I have 30 more years to pour into one of my spiritual sons from the church. I pour into him. Young man came to the church last night for the meeting. He's a major in the United States Air Force, and I poured into him when he was 12. So my hope is that as we pour into the next generation, the present generation, that they may pour into the next generation, into the next generation. I used to teach people all the time that when I had a Rites of Passage group, that I'm not teaching my son. I have a very nice son and a great young man. But I tell them all the time, I'm not teaching you. I'm teaching my grandchildren that's inside of you. Because if what I teach him, he will then imply it and put it in to his children. My son presently is the videographer and the photographer for the Reverend Al Sharpton. Reverend Sharpton takes him to every place that I taught him when he was a young man. And when he called me one day, he says, "Now, Dad, I understand the lessons that you were teaching me, because now I'm up front and center, and I see it." So my quest is to empty myself out. The more may come in, but I want to empty out. There's a great theologian by the name of Miles Monroe, and he writes these words, and he wrote it on a picture that I have of him. He said, "Die empty." I don't want to have anything left inside of me when I cross over. Isaiah knows this, and most of the young sons in my life know this, from foster care to community to church, that there must be one object that they must do for me when I die. They must carry me into the church. When the service is over, they must carry me out of the church. And when they get to the grave, they cannot roll me, but they must carry me to my grave, because I have carried them. In the last act, they will carry me, because I have poured out. So my hope is that all that I have will be poured into the present generation, that they may impact the next generation. I'm a child when Dr. King is doing what he's doing. I'm born in 1959, and a couple of more, I'm 8 or 9 years old when he goes. I don't even know who he is. I'm 9 years old. I live in Mamaroneck, New York. It's an intergenerational racial community. I didn't know nothing about race. None, not at all. I did not know what was black. I didn't know what was white. We were just people, neighbors. But afterwards, I was introduced to race. Afterwards, I was introduced to prejudice. Afterwards, because it came up blazing in regards to the death of King. So what I do now is recognize there's got to be a generation, as Menachem said on the driving, King and them must not become a mystical individual like Santa Claus. They must be real. And the only way we make them real is we rehearse it. What does the Torah teaches? We rehearse the lessons at the table with our children, so they'll know that they're still a reality.
I'm going to give you last word this time. And I have no idea what I say after that. Beautiful to you. You know, this is a moment, and I just want to be present in the moment we are in. This is hard. As a human being, it's hard. As a Jew, it's hard. Please, God, hoping for a better today and tomorrow for those who've been kept from us for 468 days. Hope is a hard word. I sing it every morning. Od lo avda tikvatenu. We still haven't lost our hope. But that is a promise we have to actively make, because I don't think it's easy to feel in any real way right now. It's a commitment we make. And so what gives me hope is that I've been told to hope. Rabbi Sachs of blessed memory said the difference between optimism and hope is very important to remember. Optimism is the belief that the world will get better. Hope is the commitment we make to making it better. So I don't know myself how to generate it per se, but I'm going to do my best because I was called to, in your language, because I was called to channel it, to actively choose it, to make it as real as I can for me and, please God, for my children. This is not an easy time to even think about such a question, but it is actually because my heart melts so much more quickly when I'm with you. No joke, not because we're in front of anybody right now, but because I am in desperate need to feel this sweet friendship. Yes. And it melts me just enough that I can feel again. Yes. And that is where hope also comes from. Yes.
It's been a wonderful time to meet you and be with you. And I just want you to know that this is a result of you, of your investment in funding the trips to Israel. This would not exist without you. And my hope. One wise man said, "The momentum's in the doing," and I hope to see people move from inaction to action. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. King is that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And that just, motivates me to know that the journey might be long, but if we keep traveling on that arc, we will get to justice, where justice rolls down like water and righteous like a mighty stream. So I continue to work. That's what I do, because I know God is on my side. As Joshua and Caleb said to the children of Israel when they were crossing the river Jordan and fighting giants, he said, we're well able. We are well able because we all carry the image of God in us, and we have God on our side. So I just look forward to the work and inspiring people to come alongside of me and do the work with me. And I am so grateful to the fellowship that I have found with my Jewish brothers. And it has changed my life. It has changed the nature of my advocacy, and it has made me a better leader. And so I just want to end this by saying thank you. Continue to do the work. You might not feel like you're making a difference, but don't grow weary in good doing. For in due season, you shall reap your reward. And so, peace and blessings, family. God bless you. And I hope to see you again soon.
I think that closes us